I am Aurora Vance, 35 years old, and for a solid 5 years, my mother, Evelyn Thorne, has assigned me a singular title in her social register, the unsalvageable asset. I walked into the penthouse that afternoon knowing exactly what I was walking into. This gathering, ostensibly a holiday party on the Upper East Side, was merely the stage for her annual performance titled The Failure of My Eldest Daughter. As I stepped into the sprawling living room overlooking Central Park, I noticed the familiar faces of hedge fund managers and prominent real estate brokers, all anticipating Evelyn's monologue. I found my sister, Sienna, looking immaculate in a tailored gray suit, already positioned beside her husband, Robert, the perfect corporate lawyer. Sienna offered a tight smile, a clear warning sign that the performance had begun without me. Before I could even exchange pleasantries, I heard Evelyn's voice, sharp and projecting across the marble floor. She was holding court near the fireplace, an expensive glass of Cabernet gripped firmly in her hand, already listing my professional shortcomings to a rapt audience of financial peers. 5 years, Evelyn declared, sighing dramatically to the small group gathered around her. 5 years since she blew that opportunity at Merrill Lynch. That dreadful $5 million accounting error. And now she's a freelance bookkeeper. She shook her head with theatrical disappointment. You see, sometimes talent just isn't enough. One must have the will to maintain the status quo, the ambition to not simply settle for less. I set my expensive bottle of wine down on a side table, making a pointed silence that drew every eye in the room. I took a deep breath, the familiar burning behind my eyes replaced by a cold, surgical calm. I apologize for interrupting the retrospective. Mother, I said, my voice steady, professional, and slightly louder than necessary. I would like everyone to meet Darius. He just flew in from Seattle. Darius Sterling, quiet and impeccably dressed, stepped forward from behind me. He possessed a silent, powerful confidence that was often mistaken for humility by people like my mother. Evelyn's eyes narrowed immediately, assessing him based on the cut of his suit and the perceived lack of recognizable fame. She ignored the introduction and addressed Darius as if he were an assistant. And what exactly do you do? Darius, Evelyn asked, her tone heavy with suggestion that she expected something painfully pedestrian. Technology. Are you one of those programmers living in the valley? It is such a pity that my daughter seems to only attract men who are easily impressed by cheap bravado. Darius simply smiled, completely unfazed by her obvious attempt at diminishment. He responded in a measured, calm voice that held the weight of undeniable authority. I work in data management. Mrs. Thorne. I manage data risk and defense for large global organizations. Evelyn chuckled dismissively. Data risk. I see. So, you're one of those computer people. Then, I am not a programmer. Mrs. Thorne. Darius corrected her, his tone sharpening ever so slightly, like the precise snap of a closing briefcase. I am the architect who builds the systems that protect billions of dollars in transaction data from malicious threats. A field, I believe, that you will fortunately never have to concern yourself with understanding. Evelyn was momentarily silenced, unable to effectively counter a statement rooted purely in technical fact. She had been elegantly blocked, and the brief flash of annoyance in her eyes confirmed my small victory. I knew the performance was far from over, but for the first time, I felt like I was holding the remote control. The party, my life, and my mother's narrative were about to go off script. The brief silence that followed Darius's calculated response was broken by the entrance of Uncle Richard Hall. Richard, a retired investment bank chairman, carried an aura of genuine financial power, not the forced facade my mother projected. He paused near us, his eyes, sharp even in retirement, focusing intently on Darius's face. I watched as Richard's professional interest was visibly piqued, a slow dawning of recognition washing over his features. I knew that Richard was about to recognize the prestige that my mother had blindly dismissed. "Hold on a moment," Richard interrupted, his voice cutting through the polite murmur of the room. "Is your firm by any chance Aegis Systems?" Darius turned towards Richard, offering a respectful nod and a slight, confident smile. "It is," Darius confirmed simply. Richard's eyes widened, the recognition turning into genuine financial awe. "You're kidding me. We paid you $4 million just last quarter to overhaul our entire transaction security network. You are the CEO." Evelyn's forced smile froze on her face. The air of superiority she wore daily cracked slightly. She looked between Richard, Darius, and me, frantically trying to recontextualize the information. "Oh, that's awfully interesting," Evelyn stammered, recovering poorly. "Aurora, darling, why didn't you tell Mother? You are so terribly secretive." "Well, I suppose it just goes to show that my daughter knows how to attract successful men after all." I met Evelyn's eyes, a cold, unwavering clarity in my own gaze, and decided it was time to deploy the first real counterblow. "I didn't meet Darius because I attract successful men. Mother," I corrected her, ensuring my voice was audible to Richard and the surrounding guests. "I met him because he had a critical, high-level problem and needed someone with a specific expertise to fix it." I paused, letting the implication sink in. He was impressed by my strategic problem-solving ability, not by my marital status or lack thereof. I looked directly at Evelyn, delivering the precise fact she never wanted to hear. "I met him through the freelance bookkeeping service you enjoy mocking. He needed a strategy to clean up a catastrophic public relations nightmare, and I delivered the analysis he needed." I watched as her attempt to claim credit for Darius's success crumbled. She had no defense against the fact that the very thing she scorned was my access point. Evelyn's expression hardened, realizing I had used her own narrative against her. "Aurora, that is quite enough drama," she hissed under her breath. Just then, my attention drifted to Robert, Sienna's husband, who was making a hasty and suspicious exit toward the library, clutching his phone. Robert, the poster child for financial perfection, was the key to cracking Sienna's facade. I decided to pivot, introducing a secondary element of chaos designed specifically to destabilize the golden child narrative. I looked directly at Sienna, whose eyes were darting nervously between her mother and Robert's disappearing figure. "By the way, Sienna," I said smoothly, cutting off whatever bitter retort Evelyn was formulating. "Happy early birthday to Robert. Have you bought him the new watch yet?" I watched as the blood drained from Sienna's face. I pressed the attack, my voice a quiet stiletto thrust. "Or has he already received a surprise gift from someone else? I could swear I saw his Audi parked outside that luxury downtown condo complex last week, the one where his old paralegal used to live." Sienna's composure shattered instantly. She choked on her wine, her perfect corporate smile dissolving into sheer panic. Evelyn, focused only on recovering face after the Darius reveal, didn't immediately register the significance. But Sienna did. Sienna quickly grabbed my arm, her grip desperate and surprisingly strong, pulling me towards the kitchen. "May I speak with you?" "Aurora," she whispered, her voice tight with suppressed hysteria. Once we were alone in the sterile, high-end kitchen, Sienna released my arm and rounded on me, her eyes wide with fear. "What did you see? What do you know? Don't you dare ruin this." She sounded less like a successful corporate marketing director and more like the frightened little girl who always hid from Mom's temper. "Mother will destroy me if she knows about this." I leaned back against the cold granite counter, crossing my arms, maintaining a clinical distance. She'll destroy you for failure. Sienna, I stated flatly, repeating the core family truth. Just like she's tried to destroy me for 35 years. I saw Robert's car where it shouldn't have been. But I've kept the secret for now. I fixed her with an unyielding stare, offering the cruel choice. Do you want to end the performance of perfection that Mother demands? Do you want to stop letting her use you as a weapon against me? I delivered my ultimatum, leaving no room for negotiation. If you ever take Mother's side against me again, I promise you, I will not hesitate to expose the truth about Robert and your sham marriage. It's time you decided whose side you're really on. Sienna stood there, paralyzed, facing the end of the meticulously curated life she had built. My words hung in the air. A choice between the familiar, stifling safety of our mother's shadow, or the terrifying, liberating truth. 3 days after the disastrous holiday gathering, my phone rang with Evelyn's private number flashing across the screen. I answered, knowing this was her attempt at strategic damage control, not genuine remorse. Aurora, darling, Evelyn began, her voice dripping with artificial warmth and concern. I've been so worried about you. About what? Mother, I asked, my tone dry and completely devoid of emotion. The fact that I am financially solvent and dating a successful man, or the fact that your narrative about my life has collapsed? Evelyn sighed dramatically, pivoting to the script she had rehearsed. I admit, I was overly zealous about your career choices. I apologize if I was a bit sharp about the bookkeeping. But now I understand. A man of Darius's stature will help you settle down and provide you with the stability you've always lacked. Do not use the word stability with me. Mother. I cut her off instantly, adopting the tone of a lead consultant dismantling a flawed proposal. Darius is an additive asset to my life, not a prerequisite for my existence. You aren't apologizing. You are attempting to mitigate your personal reputation risk now that Richard knows who I am associating with. I will not accept that. Evelyn's politeness vanished, replaced by a cold, calculating fury. You are being ridiculous, Aurora. I was trying to be maternal, but you are deliberately difficult. The line went dead. I knew then that the superficial truce was over, and the phase of direct warfare had begun. 2 days later, the whispers started, spreading through my professional network faster than any market crash. My mother, unable to accept that I had gained ground, launched a full-scale reputation sabotage campaign. I heard reports from contacts that Evelyn was circulating the story that Darius was actually financially unstable and using me, the vulnerable, recently failed former employee to launder funds and was deliberately isolating me from my family. She is employing the manipulator's defense perfectly. Darius noted later that evening, reviewing the messages on my phone. She cannot admit you chose freedom, so she must convince the world you were coerced. She is weaponizing the concept of abuse against us. The situation escalated when Sienna called, her voice tight with panic. Mom is organizing a family intervention, Aurora, this Sunday at the house. Sienna sounded terrified, trapped between the loyalty she desperately clung to and the truth she now faced. She is telling everyone Darius is a con artist and that you are mentally unstable. She intends to have everyone publicly save you. Good, I responded, a chilling sense of focus settling over me. It is exactly what I was hoping for. She is providing the perfect, concentrated audience. I immediately contacted Darius. It's time to bring the full weight of the truth, I told him. I need you to be there, not as my boyfriend, but as a witness and a strategic partner. I spent the next 2 days preparing my final presentation, gathering the legal and financial evidence of my company's success. I also confirmed the existence and accessibility of the audio files I had collected. I have 3 years of her most damaging criticisms, her most humiliating quotes, her cruelest jokes. I told Darius, holding the encrypted drive. I gathered the evidence because I knew, like any good consultant, that she would never admit fault without undeniable proof. This Sunday, she won't just face me, she will face the immutable data. Darius looked at me, not with pity, but with pure respect for the depth of my strategic planning. You didn't just walk away from her, Aurora. You prepared the exit strategy long ago. I did, I confirmed, securing the drive in my lockbox. And now we will execute the final structural dissolution of her control. She has called for a family intervention. She will receive a corporate hostile takeover. The Sunday atmosphere in the penthouse was thick with performative concern and thinly veiled curiosity. The entire extended family was seated in a solemn circle, awaiting the main event. Darius and I walked in, not knocking, projecting a calm professionalism that instantly shattered the illusion of a cozy family gathering. Evelyn stood in the center, positioning herself as the empathetic matriarch. "Thank heavens you're here, darling," Evelyn began, her voice dripping with artificial relief. "We are all gathered because we love you and we need to save you from the financial manipulation of this man." I walked to the center of the room, standing beside Darius, meeting my mother's gaze directly. "Save me from what?" "Mother," I challenged her, keeping my voice level and analytical. "From the success I've built, from the happiness I've found, you have assembled this audience to help you justify the abuse you inflicted for 35 years. And you call it love." Evelyn's composure faltered slightly at my accusation, but she quickly regrouped, turning to the family for validation. "She is in denial." "Everyone," Evelyn insisted, shaking her head sadly. "This man has completely isolated her, making her believe she's an independent entity when she's still just that poor girl who couldn't handle the $5 million error at Merrill. Thautung, I have spent 35 years being manipulated by the woman who wanted to turn me into a cheap replica of Sienna," I countered, my voice gaining heat. "Today, we are going to redefine that word, using facts, not feelings." Evelyn's face went pale as Richard, my uncle, leaned forward, suddenly intensely interested. "Aurora, let's be honest," Evelyn snapped, desperate to regain control of the narrative. "You are a freelance accountant with a notorious professional stain. Your financial standing is precarious at best. And Darius is clearly exploiting that vulnerability. I am not a freelance bookkeeper, Mother," I stated, the words cutting through the tension like glass. "I am the founder and CEO of Phoenix Consulting." The air instantly solidified. Several people gasped, and even Darius looked impressed by the sharpness of my delivery. "After that public scandal, the one you mention at every holiday, I built an entirely new firm that specializes in restructuring catastrophic corporate failures." I reached into my jacket, pulling out a small, sealed envelope. "The net worth of Phoenix Consulting is not the $5 million loss you cling to. It is currently valued at over $150 million. I handed the notarized documents to Richard. Evelyn stared at the papers in Richard's hand, her face white with shock and fury. "That is fabricated," she choked out, her voice tight with panic. "That is all his doing. A lie he's concocted to take control of the family assets." She pointed accusingly at Darius. "She is lying. She is sick." "Is she?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. I pulled out a small, unobtrusive speaker from my handbag and connected it to my phone. "I knew you would deny the financial truth, Mother, because you only respect money. But you will not deny the emotional truth." I looked around the room, making eye contact with every frozen face. "I have collected 3 years of audio evidence against the sustained emotional abuse you inflicted. I needed proof because I knew you would lie until the very end." I hit play. Evelyn's voice, clear and cold, filled the silent room from a recording taken on Thanksgiving 2 years prior. Look at Sienna. That is what success looks like. You, Aurora, are simply a disappointment. A persistent stain I cannot scrub out of the family reputation. Then followed another clip, even more vicious, taken on my last birthday. No man wants a damaged woman who failed her way out of the big leagues. You are pathetic. The room was dead silent, the sound of her cruelty amplified and undeniable. Evelyn lunged forward, trying to grab the speaker, but Darius calmly stepped in front of her. Stop it. Stop playing those vile things, Evelyn cried out, her voice cracking, her performance completely ruined. That is taken out of context. I was frustrated. I was trying to help her. You were being cruel. Mother? I stated flatly, hitting pause. And you enjoyed it. You enjoyed making me feel small because it made you feel powerful. The lie of freelance bookkeeping allowed you to do that uninterrupted. Richard lowered the documents, looking at Evelyn with profound disappointment. Evelyn, this is appalling, he said slowly. This is not concern. This is calculated emotional damage. Evelyn, losing the room completely, turned desperately to Sienna. Sienna? Tell them she's being manipulated by this con artist, Sienna, who had been listening with tears silently streaming down her face, finally stood up, her body trembling. I can't, Mother, Sienna whispered, the sound cracking the final veneer of family perfection. Aurora is right. I stood by and watched it happen. She looked directly at her mother, her voice gaining a strength I had never heard. And Mother, you will not use my life as a shield anymore. Robert is having an affair. And I am filing for divorce. The perfection is over. Evelyn gasped, physically stumbling back as the dual shock of my success and Sienna's public failure hit her. Darius stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Evelyn, delivering the final moral judgment. Mrs. Thorne, Aurora is not being manipulated. She is, and has always been, the master operator of her own life. His voice was measured, unforgiving. You dedicated 35 years to proving she was a failure. But the only failure here is your inability to love your own daughter unless she conformed to your control. Darius took my hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and we walked out of that suffocating living room. The sound of Evelyn's hysterical sobs and the confused murmuring of the extended family faded behind the closing door. I didn't look back. The act was complete. The narrative successfully overthrown. It felt less like a family confrontation and more like a successful, highly volatile corporate acquisition. You performed a textbook strategic dismantling, Darius said quietly as we reached the elevator, his voice filled with professional admiration. She had no counter-strategy prepared for fact-based evidence. I offered a small, weary smile, finally allowing myself to breathe the clean, cold air of the city. When your entire identity is built on lies, the truth is the most effective weapon, I replied. The days immediately following the intervention were a blur of communication. But this time, the texts and calls were different. Sienna was the first to reach out, her message raw and apologetic. She didn't try to defend her past silence. She only expressed gratitude. You were right, Aurora. Her text read, the collapse of the perfect life isn't the end of the world. It's a starting line. Sienna confirmed she had immediately filed for divorce against Robert, using the information I had provided as leverage. He was so confident in his untouchable status, he didn't even bother to hide his tracks effectively. She wrote, you showed me that the destruction of my old image is the only path to real freedom. I was proud of her. She had finally chosen herself over the gilded cage of Evelyn's approval. My father, who had remained silently troubled throughout the entire ordeal, messaged me the following week. He didn't offer an apology for his inaction, but he offered his own quiet revolt. Aurora. His message read simply, I cannot fix your mother's character, but I can fix my environment. I've moved into a short-term rental downtown. His small act of leaving Evelyn was a significant crack in her foundation, a testament that my confrontation had freed more than just myself. However, Evelyn herself never called to apologize. Instead, she embarked on a predictable, desperate smear campaign, telling anyone who would listen that I was cruel, ungrateful, and had been turned into a monster by Darius's manipulative wealth. But her audience was significantly smaller now. The witnesses in that living room had heard the truth. I knew her only remaining weapon was her reputation as a financial advisor, built on decades of connections. I launched the final, calculated blow through Phoenix Consulting. I didn't use any personal contact. I used my firm's extensive network to identify Evelyn's most lucrative and time-consuming client, a large private equity firm. My team discreetly submitted an unsolicited, airtight proposal detailing how Evelyn's aggressive, outdated strategies posed an unnecessary compliance risk to the client's portfolio. I ensured the proposal included several redacted, non-identifying facts about her volatile judgment. The private equity firm, valuing stability over loyalty, terminated Evelyn's contract for strategic reasons the following week. It was a clean, professional severing of her primary income stream. I didn't need to destroy her life. I just needed to remove her power platform. Darius and I married 6 months later in a small, quiet ceremony overlooking the water, a conscious rejection of the massive, performative spectacle Evelyn would have demanded. Sienna was there, looking genuinely happy for the first time in years, already thriving in her newly independent life. Richard and Aunt Carol attended, their presence a silent validation. I never regretted the confrontation. Looking back on that terrible holiday season, I realized the greatest victory wasn't proving my $150 million net worth or exposing the audio recordings. The true revenge was the profound, unshakable feeling of self-possession. Evelyn had spent 35 years trying to convince me I was worthless, a failure who needed to be controlled. But in the end, I discovered my worth was an internal asset, one she had never held the deed to. I had chosen myself, and in doing so, I had finally become free. Thank you for following Aurora's intense journey toward self-justice and freedom. Remember, you always have the right to set boundaries and redefine your own value. If you love sharp, thrilling revenge stories and satisfying cinematic showdowns, please hit like and subscribe to the channel for more real-life narratives told in this style.